But we ought to be single-mindedly focusing here on supporting economic development and job growth. But while we're doing that, I believe in the United States Senate, I have to say some members of the other body, the United States House of Representatives, continue to seek sustained confrontation and seem to me in shutting down the government as a misguided statement that they're serious about debt reduction. It seems they just want to pick a fight for a fight's sake, while our people, United States citizens, will be left to pick up the pieces from a shutdown. And the latest demands have not been about funding the government at all. I think we've got common ground on what the number ought to be, but the fight now seems to be on controversial abortion and climate change issues. I don't understand it. We have this tentative agreement to cut billions from current spending levels, but the Speaker of the House seems to continue to demand that we ought to focus on controversial abortion and climate change issues. These are hot-button issues. Why you would insert them in an unrelated budget debate when there's so much at stake is beyond me. Now, I understand we want to show the American people that we're serious about deficit reduction. I am. I know the presiding officer is, but I think in Colorado, people see straight through this latest ploy. What do abortion and climate change have to do with finding a compromise on keeping our government running? Nothing. They have nothing to do with that. And strikes me the debates become increasingly ideological and increasingly about sending a partisan political message, one that leaves the American people paying the price. We've had 13 straight months of private sector job growth. We've added 1.8 million jobs in that time, but our economy is still really fragile. And way too many Americans, way too many Minnesotans, way too many Coloradans are struggling. And I have no doubt that a government shutdown at this time would create a counterproductive effect on our economic recovery. But don't just take my word for it. I'm a senator from Colorado, but listen to what top business leaders of all political persuasions are saying. Business Roundtable President John Engler, former Republican governor of Michigan, said that businesses would face the dangerous, quote, unintended consequences, unquote, where interest rates could rise because of a shutdown and there could be turmoil in our financial markets. Forecasters at Goldman Sachs have warned that a shutdown could shave off growth in our GDP every single week. And CEOs of all stripes have warned about a shutdown's effect on confidence in the U.S. economic recovery. We know, presiding officer and I do, and senators from across the country, that confidence is what we need to build. That's what's lacking in many respects. So a setback of this nature, a shutdown, would actually prevent the growth we need to tangibly address our long-term fiscal imbalance. In other words, we get the economy growing again, we'll have more tax revenues. We'll see that gap between what we're spending and what we're bringing in narrow. I can't help but think, in the context of this recent debate, about my uncle Stuart Udall, who's father of Senator Udall from New Mexico. He wrote a book called The Forgotten Founders that focused on the settling of the West. And, well, I should add, he focused on the people who were there at the time the Europeans arrived as well. And the theme of the book was really on how the West was settled, how it was built. And it made the strong case that people coming out to the West, again, I think the presiding officer's home state, which is in the near West, probably fits this characterization. People coming to the West, they weren't looking to get in gunfights or range wars. They were actually looking to start their lives over and pursue the American dream. And Stuart pointed out that in reality, particularly when you watch those Hollywood movies, the people that were standing on the board sidewalks watching the gunfights, those are really the people that built the West. And they built the West by working together, solving problems, looking out for one another. It didn't really matter what your political party was. And it feels to me like today the American people are standing on one of those board sidewalks watching the same senseless gunfights and range wars right here in Washington, D.C. And I got to say, I know I was sent here to work together and solve shared problems. And I'd like to suggest that this spirit I just described is in stark contrast to this new kind of divisive politics that's brewing away here in America. It's a kind of politics that furthers disagreement. It draws ideological lines in the sand, and it sows disrespect at the expense of shared interests and collective prosperity. American people are really seeing a disappointing example of that this week. While a vocal minority seems to favor acrimony and combativeness, which in the end will just further slow our economy, many of us here are doing what we can to do the people's business and trying in good faith to prevent a government shutdown. And I have to say, Mr. President, as the American people look on in amazement at this spectacle, I stand with them wondering if members of Congress will finally settle down, act like adults, and work collaboratively towards a real budget solution. And yes, we have to reduce our government deficit and debt. You'd be hard-pressed to find a senator more committed to that cause than I am. So let's reach that goal. But let's reach it in a way that protects our senior citizens, our students, our veterans, our border security. I could go on with a very long list. Let's do it in a way that slashes spending but doesn't harm our fragile economic recovery or divert our attention onto divisive social issues. We can't afford a government shutdown. And I'll be disappointed, to say the least, if the bipartisan deal that's before us is undercut by contentious, unrelated issues like abortion and climate change. I wrote a letter 2 days ago to the Speaker of the House, Mr. Boehner, who I know well, in which a large number of my fellow senators joined me to suggest to him and urge him to work with us to avoid a federal government shutdown. I'll stay here all day, all night, whatever it takes. So I'm here to urge my colleagues in both chambers. I served in the House. I now have the great privilege of serving in the Senate. Let's sit down together. Let's reason together. Let's be commonsensical together. Let's find a compromise. That's the American way. I know that's what propelled me to the United States Senate, was my willingness to work across party lines. And I think the Senate of the United States could set an example. There are colleagues on both sides of the aisle who work together, who know the stakes are high. That's the reason I came to the floor today, to urge senators of both parties to work together, to find a common sense compromise, to keep this federal government moving forward, and to make sure our economy is focused upon and that we produce as many jobs as possible. That is job one.